gets out into the world, you know?
Brad, did you, so you brought up a little bit about the new media and this whole effort that you have to use Facebook and you have to be on Twitter, and did you experience that? Did you have any of that when you were?
Yeah, no, I mean, when I was starting out, like, MySpace was still a thing. I remember my agent being like, you should go on there, and I didn't know what it was. And I just started, I literally just opened an account in MySpace Music, because I didn't know what I was doing. I was like, oh, they have tour dates, and I was like going on book tours. So then I was like, it's not music, and I started this site, and I started blogging, and it did okay. You know, I started to get people to follow me, and I started to understand that there was like, you know, this interactivity to it on the comment board, and people were buying the book because of it, and you know, it was, I don't know, it seems like it seems like so much has changed so fast. Like, this was before Twitter. It's not that long ago, and you know, this is when Tila Tequila was a big deal. You know? And so yeah, so I started doing that, and then, you know, the Nervous Breakdown, my online literary site, was born out of that experience, because I was doing this on my own. I was having some success with it, and it just occurred to me that it would be more interesting to do it in concert with other writers. And I also realized that the technology out there, the blog platforms, or whatever you want to call them, allowed writers to start their own magazines fairly easily, at, you know, fairly low barrier to entry. And so it started in 2006, and we've gone through 3 different build-outs, and you've witnessed all this. So I mean, it's grown way more. It's grown way larger than I ever anticipated, way more quickly. So now it's become this like organism that requires tending, and we're a publisher now, and we're doing this club, and we're doing contests, and there's 300 writers, and there's 18 editors on it, and it's a full-time deal. But it's very exciting, and it's going to be interesting to see where it goes from here. I can't imagine where it's going to be 3 years from now. But I think everything she said, I would assume we're all going to kind of echo what she said about how much you have to do on your own when you write a book. It's like your kid going off to school, or I imagine that it's like a kid going off to school, like, you just don't want to see it get its ass kicked on the playground. So, or his or her ass kicked on the playground. So you wind up with a vested interest in it that exceeds by a long shot anybody else's. And I don't know a single writer who's ever published a book who hasn't worked like crazy on behalf of their book. It's a natural thing, and your publisher's going to expect it most likely from you. So.
Yeah, Mark, will you talk about also having your own platform and what that?
Yeah, before I do that though, actually, I was going to say I agree. I think really 90% of what Brooke said was what I was going to tell you too, from the fact that publicists are, you know, many of them are not very good. The ones who are very good are working on many other books besides their own, and they're following a template, and they're basically doing the same 5 things for everybody's books. The only area that I will offer a slightly different perspective on is that I will say that you guys, if you're lucky enough to sell your first book, you're going to get an advance of some size. It might be $5,000, it might be $20,000, it might be whatever. Whatever your advance is, that's your publicity budget. Because the way things work today, everything is run through Nielsen, through BookScan, and if your first book doesn't sell in some kind of quantity, you will have an incredibly difficult time selling your second book. Now, in the case of my first, and when my book came out in the hardcover, because I had the blog and I had a lot of visibility and I had a fairly big tour, and everywhere I went on tour I got media because of, you know, I'm a big mouth on my blog, so that sort of took care of itself. But when the paperback came out, I spent $10,000 to hire a publicist to help me just for the paperback, and she did things like get me those assignments. She pitched me to NPR and to places like that to do those guest things. And because my agent and I talked about it, we said we need to make sure that we register some sales in the paperback as well, because that hardcover is that initial wave of interest, but once that's gone, you need to show that you sold something in the paperback. And he basically said, this is an investment toward your next book, and he really encouraged me to spend the money, and I did not want to spend it, I promise you, but I did, and you know, in the end I think it was the right call. I'll know that when the second book starts making the rounds. But so whatever your advance is, spend that for publicity, because that is, it will pay you back down the line. You know, in terms of the platform, yeah, I mean, I was very lucky with the blog, and I started the Elegant Variation at sort of like the last moment where it was possible to launch a new literary blog and still have people pay attention to you, because there were only like 10 of them. Now there's thousands of them, and I could exactly the same thing I've always done, and nobody would know I was alive. So I like to say it was the only time I was ever in the right place at the right time. And when my novel came out, you know, and it helped me get the agents, because every agent who I was writing to already knew me and they knew my blog. When the book went out to editors, again, they knew me. No editor's going to buy a book they don't like just because somebody has a popular blog, but it certainly helped get me to the top of the stack in each of these cases. And as I said, when the book came out, I have kind of a reputation for being a little bit of a tart critic. And so when the book came out, no newspaper could resist the angle that the tough critic now puts himself out there. It's kind of like, not to put myself in the same league as a critic, but when James Wood wrote his first novel, you know, they were all kind of out waiting and watching to see what would become of it. So there was some natural media interest, and I did everything I could to encourage that, so and fan the flames there, and it helped. It meant at least there were, you know, 15 people at my readings instead of 5. So, you know, it was readings for literature. And the other thing, you know, book tours in the end, there's so much conventional wisdom on book tours. They're essential. They're dreadful. My agent told me going on a book tour would be the biggest waste of my time. And I said to him, dude, it's my first novel. I have to meet my people. And about halfway through the bookstore, I swung back through New York, and I was already exhausted, and I was getting sick, and I was miserable. And I walked into his office, and I looked at him, and I just said, never again. And he just started laughing at me. On the other hand, you know, a novelist friend of mine, she really believes that if you're not willing to go out on tour, the house doesn't pay as much attention to you. Although in Brooke's case, you found they didn't even want to send you on tour to begin with.
I think that it also depends on, I think it depends a little bit on who you are as a writer and sort of what, like whether or not your book has any kind of, I sell my book really well. The readings that I've done, the New York, Chicago, LA, and I'm working on setting up San Francisco and Portland right now. I just get a lot of people there. Like I do a lot of like local marketing, and I got inspired by that woman Henrietta, the woman who wrote the Henrietta Lacks book. I guess like Rebecca Skloot, she's
another client of mine.
Oh, really? So she apparently created her own book tour. She and her dad, she wrote this article about how she and her dad sat down and made a map of the United States and figured out every place they knew somebody, and they just started calling. And it's kind of like grassroots organizing. Actually, you call somebody in the city, you say, hey, I want to come to your city. Can you get like 25 people in a room for me? And so I feel like getting that to happen helps. I've sold out every bookstore that I've.
She got on the New York Times bestseller list.
Yeah, she did. And when I've done the readings, I've sold out the stock in the bookstore. So I keep going back to Random House saying, hey, you guys, when I go there, I sell books. Do you want to do that? But like, I have a novelist friend who's incredibly shy, for whom that wouldn't work. You know what I mean? Like, he doesn't actually want to do that. So I think it depends a little on.
But the other thing is that it's important to meet the booksellers, and that's the other piece about getting out to the bookstores, is you want to cultivate the relationships with the booksellers. You want them to like you, to think you're a nice person, because you want them to buy your next book when it comes out. And that's the other piece of making the rounds and getting face-to-face with people.